The BTK case involves a series of brutal murders committed over 3 decades, characterized by binding, torturing, and killing his victims. There are a few diagnostic impressions for us to discuss. Keep in mind that this is not a formal psychological diagnosis, just an impression based on what we do know about Dennis Rader. Rader exhibited traits consistent with the diagnosis of sexual sadism disorder and, like many serial killers, antisocial personality disorder, or APD. Let's address the criteria for sexual sadism disorder and the behaviors exhibited by Rader fitting this diagnostic impression. To have a diagnosis for sexual sadism disorder, one must, over a period of at least 6 months, have recurrent and intense sexual arousal from the physical or psychological suffering of another, as manifested by fantasies, urges, or behaviors. Rader's crimes were characterized by a sexual component involving torture and control over his victims. He would experience significant arousal and pleasure himself while torturing his victims. Rader experienced recurrent and intense sexual arousal from the physical and psychological suffering of his victims. His method of binding, torturing, and killing, as well as the sexual nature of some of his crimes, clearly indicates a pattern of deriving sexual gratification from their suffering. His detailed planning, fantasies, and collection of items from his victims further support this criteria. The next diagnostic criteria to fit for this diagnosis is the individual has acted on these sexual urges with a non-consenting person, or the sexual urges or fantasies cause clinically significant distress or impairment in social, occupational, or other significant important areas of functioning. Rader acted on his sexual urges with multiple non-consenting victims. His modus operandi involved breaking into homes, binding his victims, and subjecting them to prolonged torture before killing them. The non-consensual nature of these acts and the extreme suffering inflicted on his victims demonstrate that he met this criteria. His actions were not confined to fantasy. He repeatedly engaged in these behaviors over many years. Another criteria to meet is the fantasies, sexual urges, or behaviors cause clinically significant distress or impairment in social, occupational, or other important areas of functioning. While Rader managed to maintain a facade of normalcy in social and occupational life, we see the incongruence with him being a church leader and a torturer serial killer. His need to act on his sadistic fantasies led to the murder of 10 individuals, causing immense distress to his community and to the families of the victims. The extreme nature of his crimes and the eventual breakdown of his ability to keep his actions hidden underscore the impairment in functioning due to his disorder. Dennis Rader exhibited clear signs of sexual sadism disorder as defined by the DSM-5. His recurrent and intense sexual arousal from the suffering of his victims, the non-consensual nature of his acts, and the severe impact on his ethical and moral functioning provide evidence that he met the criteria for this disorder. Rader's criminal activities and behaviors align closely with the diagnostic requirements, illustrating the profound impact of his sexual sadism on his life and those he victimized. Next, let's look at antisocial personality disorder and how this applies to Rader. A disregard for violation of the rights of others occurring since age 15, as indicated by 3 or more of the following. 1. Failure to conform to social norms with respect to lawful behaviors, as indicated by repeatedly performing acts that are grounds for arrest. Rader's criminal activities spanned from 1974 to 1991, involving multiple instances of breaking and entering, stalking, and murder. Number 2, deceitfulness, as indicated by repeated lying, use of aliases, or conning others for personal profit or pleasure. It's important to remember that Rader was a leader at his church, and this perpetuated the idea that he was invincible and above being caught, all while presenting to be the person actually opposite of what he was. He deceived law enforcement and the public through letters and the messages that taunted police. Number 3, impulsivity or failure to plan ahead. Although his murders were planned, He also exhibited impulse behaviors in selecting victims and acting on these desires. Number 4, irritability and aggressiveness, as indicated by repeated physical fights or assaults. His murders were violent, involving physical assault, torture, and strangulation. Number 5, lack of remorse, as indicated by being indifferent to or rationalizing having hurt, mistreated, or stolen from another. Rader showed no remorse for his actions, often discussing his crimes with detachment and a lack of empathy for his victims. In open court, he effortlessly minimized the trauma the family members of the victims he brutally tortured experienced, highlighting his lack of empathy, remorse, and grandiose beliefs. Number 6, the individual is at least 18 years old. Rader committed his first known murder at age 28. Number 7, there is evidence of conduct disorder with onset before age of 15. We know his early history included signs of cruelty to animals and to voyeuristic behaviors. Number 8, the occurrence of antisocial behavior is not exclusively during the course of a schizophrenic or bipolar disorder. Rader does not have a known diagnosis for schizophrenia or bipolar disorder. Dennis Rader displayed a dual life, maintaining the facade of normalcy as a family man and community member, all while committing heinous crimes for his sexual gratification. His ability to compartmentalize his life indicates a complex psychological profile. His criminal activities were meticulously planned, involving prolonged stalking and control over his victims, indicating a disturbing and compulsive personality structure. Dennis Rader's behaviors and criminal activities meet the DSM-5 criteria for antisocial personality disorder and sexual sadism disorder. His actions were driven by a profound lack of empathy, deceitfulness, and a need for control and dominance, manifesting in violent and sadistic behaviors.
We hope you enjoyed our look at Dennis Rader and the BTK case. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like the videos and subscribe to the Flourish Family Therapy channel.
Also, be on the lookout for my mindful meditation video coming soon.
See you next time.